So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
We do different scale of drills. So it depends on the objectives we're trying to achieve. So for every drill or exercise we do, we have a set number of objectives that we're looking at the team, evaluating their performance to make sure that they actually get them done. So typically we would actually start with something going wrong. And one of the things we would measure is that they get the notifications out in time, that they account for everybody in a timely manner, and then that they get the re-entry team sent out in a timely manner. And what we may do is we may stage some casualties or something else to set more aggressive objectives. But generally, it's as soon as they've achieved these objectives. Most of our drills are limited to an hour, 2 hours, because we're diverting people from their normal operations. But we do larger scale drills once a year for the whole site. And then each station has 5 a year where they're set at 4 hours. So we can go right through the whole spectrum within that 4 hours of how they would recover from an event, how they would get it under control. The actual full day events are meant to involve outside agencies such as the province so that they can continue with dealing with the public. So on site, we've probably got it under control, but there are things that need to be carried out by other agencies, so we involve those. And so what we're actually doing for a large-scale event this year is actually doing a time jump, and we're going into recovery. And we're actually working with the province now in planning this, because it's going to involve a lot more agencies in an area that's not been tried out before, is going into this recovery phase. And this is all about how you would get people back into their homes, how you ensure that it's safe for people to return. So that's a very good point, and it's the way the industry is going right now.
I think you referred to nuclear as a hazard, but I'm curious, looking at it from the climate hazards perspective, what climate hazards are you concerned about maybe over the next 3 or 5 years that you're creating resilience for in the facilities that are here in Ontario and more broadly in the country? And do you have an example of where there was an extreme event where you could have shown resiliency that maybe we don't know about in the last 5 or 10 years, even if it was on one small piece of infrastructure that came from a climate hazard?
So one aspect that we've looked at is tornadoes, because there seems to have been an occurrence of tornadoes around our site, more frequent than has happened in the past. So we've actually set up some divergence of keeping emergency equipment located away from the site that can be brought onto the site to deal with an emergency. So if a tornado passes through and impacts on the site, we can still get facilities and people to the site to respond to that. It's not actually damaged as the tornado passes through.
And that's where you're going over the next 3 to 5 years, is particularly tornadoes?
Is to continue with that. It's tornadoes, ice storms, and water levels are things that we're looking at. Yeah, the lake level, which seemed to be going down, but now seems to be going back up again.
Maybe if I could just add, I think that's a point to clarify that the facility itself would be looking at the hazards to the plant, whereas the province is not looking at it from that perspective. We're not looking at what happens if a tornado hits Bruce or a hurricane or what have you. Again, we're dealing with that offsite radiation. But certainly our organization, being an all hazards organization, we're dealing with everything that happens out there. And a lot of the impacts, severe weather in particular from climate change, are something that we're very closely attuned to, given that we're managing forest fires in the northern part of the province and wherever they might occur, looking at flooding issues, looking at tornadoes hitting, Ottawa in September and those kinds of things.
Just wondering to what extent you've listed, Steve, various events and hazards you think of. Or how do you think about cybersecurity, cyber risks? So
we do have a cybersecurity team, and they carry out drills. And this year we've got a major drill with both the province and the IESO that's going to be spread over a day, looking at a massive cyber attack where you're just getting inundated by foreign people, shall we say, trying to get into your systems. The one thing that we do have is for the stations themselves, they have no connection to the outside world. So the computers that are in the control room are just not connected. So actually getting into those systems would require an insider coming in and doing something. So we're looking at that threat as well and how we would combat it.
Okay, so no USB, no
That's
flash
correct.
drive.
We're making sure we've got strict controls over those USBs that are brought into the station or particularly in the control room. Yeah.
Okay, and since I walked to the mics, I have another question. With regards to the plans and the drills that you perform, is there an audit done of your response? Because so far you've mentioned that for the larger ones you involve Dave and his
Yes.
team, but you basically get someone to test your
Yeah.
effectiveness.
So we have internal audits that are carried out. So in a way, my evaluating the station's performance is a form of audit itself. But we have auditors internally that come in and audit our performance. And then once a year, the CNSC carry out what's called a field inspection. So they will come and choose a drill or an exercise to observe, and they will bring a team, and they'll write a report, and then they'll tell us what we've done well and what we need to improve. So that's on an annual basis. And this year, we have a large-scale exercise, so there will be a larger CNSC present for that, this year. Yeah. It's called Huron Resilience, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a similar process with the province because we're engaged in these exercises as well as other exercises, and always have a team of evaluators who are hopefully independent and objective and able to monitor what we did during the exercise. Coming out of that, various debrief sessions and so on is an after-action report that is then monitored in terms of the implementation of those corrective actions. So it's a critical part of any emergency exercise.
My question is pertaining to community involvement in recovery planning, or even in your response planning. How have you involved the community looking at, and this is probably more towards Dave from a long-term perspective, and transitioning them to the phase where they can get the financial assistance?
Working with the municipalities is a big part of what we do in terms of our planning. They're the ones that are implementing a lot of those protective actions and evacuations as an example. They really have that on-the-ground detailed capability and knowledge to be able to implement that. They are connected with us as well through the Nuclear Emergency Management Coordinating Committee. So all of the designated municipalities, and these are designated under the plan, are a part of that committee and a part of that process. So we work very closely with Kincardine, with Durham Region, the City of Toronto, and so on and so forth. Certainly, we're at the beginning stages, I think, in terms of detailed recovery planning, and all of those stakeholders would be a very important part of that process, both the facility, provincial ministries, federal departments, and the municipalities in terms of how that plays out and how that recovery is implemented.
I was wondering if you could go into a little more detail on kind of some of the processes, the procedures, any coverage restrictions for the public, how would the money kind of flow to the public, and how would they file claims? I know you mentioned online, but I was wondering if you could go into a little more detail on that.
NIAC has put together an extensive claims response program. We've partnered with a large Canadian adjusting firm as a third-party adjuster provider. We've put these implementing plans together so that if there's an incident, we receive part of the notification. We have collaborated both with the stations and with the province to be able to be in at the ground floor level when if an incident should happen, and then we can then dial into our members if we need to have them call for funds and put funding into a trust fund, a bank account. And from there, our adjuster has been tasked with and has an entire matrix and very detailed processes that they go through to be able to adjust the claims. With respect to the claims themselves, we have a social media presence, and we'll have that up and running, and we'll direct the claimants to the website. There's also a 1-800 number that they'll be able to call. That's all in reserve, et cetera. All of this is on a dark site that we have that'll be deployed within hours of being notified. And then when a claimant would fill in the website, for instance, and they put in their email address, which is a must fill in field, they will automatically receive back an email that gives them an incident report number so that they can follow up with the adjuster, who will be in touch with them within 24, 48 hours. So we've put all of this infrastructure in place, and with the hope that we never have to use it. Well, the Nuclear Liability and Compensation Act is the act that governs nuclear liability in Canada and outlines what is broadly called the heads of damages under which a claimant can receive compensation. So so it basically is like bodily injury and property, very similar to what you would get coverages for under the general liability policy. And the adjuster would basically use that as a model, and our policy models after what's in the act.
What about when the power goes out, and then what is the communication? Like, how does communication flow? How can I, as a human being living in where I live in the west end of Toronto, expect to get messages?
That's always a challenge when there isn't power, most certainly. And I think if we go back to one of the slides, there was quite a number of mechanisms for communicating with the public. If you happen to be within 3 kilometers, you're covered by a siren system, a siren network, that covers that entire area. So night or day, you're going to hear that tone, and through public education, people would know to tune into their radio or television when they start to hear that tone. Certainly, it's one of the reasons that I'm excited about the Alert Ready program, which has been many years in the making, where that notification is coming in through your cell phone. If you happen to be in the impacted area, you'll get notification of that. So we use a lot of different platforms as well. We're going to use radio and television. We use social media, which particularly for those that are younger than me is incredibly powerful for getting messaging out. So we try to cover, because in a power outage there are going to be challenges associated with that, but I think to use as many platforms as possible, you're really sort of covering the bases as much as is feasible. We do not have carrier pigeons in the province. We are looking at it, but
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful means is social media, and we've seen that in use. But I know in our municipality, which is a lot smaller, admittedly, than Toronto, we are tied into the OPP, and they would go around and they would be broadcasting messages as they drive around the town. So there are ways, yeah.
What about nuclear waste disposal? Is it above ground, underground?
It's currently above ground.
In case of the evacuation and that mega emergency, you said you will evacuate it around 50 kilometers radius, right? So all of that area has to evacuate it. And I'm just wondering, do you have a requirement for the municipalities around that area to have like bunkers or special shelters? I mean, I'm wondering how they will deal with this much of evacuation.
I'll correct if I heard you correctly. Evacuation is contemplated only out to 10 kilometers. Beyond 10 kilometers, what we're finding is that the levels of radiation or the dose that you might get from radiation drops off incredibly quickly. And this is, keep in mind, this is a severe accident that's almost beyond the realm of probability. So we're looking at evacuation for that 10-kilometer zone. There are host communities that are established that are linked in. They're in fact designated. So, for example, the City of Toronto, the City of Peterborough. The strategy is, and this is based on major evacuations in the U.S. largely, is that people would be going to a location of their choice. So they would go to family, to friends, to the cottage up north, to, you know, wherever they wanted to go. Those that did not have a place to go would be able to go to a reception center, and they would receive lodging there. If we were looking at Pickering, for example, clearly that would have to be expanded out from just Toronto and Peterborough, and it really would be a whole Southern Ontario effort. In terms of providing hosting facilities for people that had to evacuate. Something that we do every year, particularly in terms of Northern Ontario flooding along the James Bay coast, where we're in the process right now of lining up host communities for evacuees right now so that we know where to fly them to and so forth. The area out to 50 kilometers, you won't get the dose that will have any adverse health impacts, but that's where we would control what you're ingesting, and that would be the key focus there.